Hey guys, I'm Parda Luri, and in this lesson, we're going to be talking about the United States government, and specifically the system of checks and balances. So, before we get into the idea of checks and balances, we need to talk about the separation of powers. This is just like it was stated in the Constitution that the United States government should be split into three different powers. So, the executive branch, legislative branch, and judicial branch. So this entire concept prevents one branch from gaining too much power. So we'll lead this into checks and balances, but let's talk about the specific responsibilities of each of these branches first. So I'm just going to be reading off of this image, if you can't see. So the executive branch enforces laws, and the president is the commander-in-chief of armed forces, makes foreign treaties, proposes laws, appoints Supreme Court justices and federal court justices, and pardons those convicted in federal court. Now, in the legislative branch, the Congress, which is made up of the upper house, which is called the Senate, and the lower, which is called the House of Representatives. So Congress, together, passes federal laws, controls federal appropriations, approves treaties and presidential appointments, regulates interstate commerce, establishes lower court system. So the judicial, lastly, the judicial branch, it's pretty much a court, the Supreme Court. And this reviews lower court decisions, decides constitutionality of laws, and decides cases involving disputes between states. So all three of these branches, they serve their own roles, but each of these branches also has to make sure the other two branches aren't going off track and getting too much power. So this brings us into the idea of the checks and balances. So checks and balances, it just gives each branch powers, and that allows them to check up on the other branches. So as we said before, it prevents branches from abusing their powers and getting too much. And this preserves the separation of powers. Right, so checks and balances is the idea that one branch can pretty much check the other, it can regulate the other, but separation of powers is the actual splitting of the powers. So make sure to get that. So the idea of checks and balances, it requires cooperation between the branches of government, right? All branches have to be in sync, and they always all have to be on the same page. Now, though the checks and balances that we talked about so far is between the branches of the government, there's also another checks and balances, and that's between the states, like the state level governments, and the federal government. So how this works is that the Constitution actually listed out certain responsibilities and certain tasks that the federal government can do, but anything other than those tasks go to the state governments. So states can do anything other than what is explicitly mentioned in the Constitution. So if the federal government feels if the federal government passes a law and states feel like there's too much power or too much overreaching of their power, states can actually veto the federal government's ruling. So let's go into the checks on each of the branches. So let's talk about Congress and how the other two powers can check Congress. So the president, which is the executive branch, can check Congress by vetoing a bill. So Congress may approve it, but the president may not approve it, so the president can veto the bill. Next, the Supreme Court can check the Congress by declaring a law unconstitutional. So the Supreme Court checks the Constitution and just makes sure that the law that Congress passed abides with the Constitution. Next, moving on to the president. So the Congress can impeach a president, or they they can impeach the judges and officials. So the Congress has to approve of the judges and officials that the president chooses. Okay, the Supreme Court can check the president by declaring executive orders unconstitutional. So just like how the Supreme Court checked Congress, the Supreme Court can do the same with the president. So once the president passes a bill, they have to check the Constitution and make sure it abides with the Constitution as well. Now moving on to the Supreme Court. So Congress can impeach judges. So if the judges do something bad and they go too much out of their power, Congress can impeach a judge. On the other hand, president appoints new judges. So the president has the power to promote a judge to the Supreme Court.